The biggest clue heading into episode 5 is right there in the episode's premise. Jo and her team are moving closer to a hidden network operating through covert handlers. That is a huge development. Because Jo isn't simply chasing one individual anymore. She's potentially dealing with an entire system. And that's exactly the kind of enemy that can be extremely difficult to destroy. Think about it. If Jo captures one operative, another person can take their place. If she exposes one handler, there could be 5 more operating somewhere else. And if the network has already established connections inside powerful institutions, Jo could be fighting an enemy she can't even clearly identify. That's why I believe episode 5 could expand the story dramatically. Jo may think she's getting close to the people responsible. But what if the people she's chasing are only the middlemen? What if there's another level above them? And what if that person has been manipulating events from the beginning? My first major prediction is that Jo will finally identify what the hidden network is actually trying to accomplish. Up until now, we've seen pieces of the operation. But the bigger objective remains unclear. Is this about intelligence? Political influence? Military strategy? Money? Or something even bigger? Episode 5 could finally give Jo a clearer picture. And I think the answer could surprise her. Instead of discovering that the enemy wants one specific piece of information, Jo may realize that they're building something much larger. A network capable of manipulating events without directly exposing the people behind it. And that's terrifying, because the most dangerous enemy isn't necessarily the person holding the weapon. It's the person controlling the person holding the weapon. And Jo could be getting closer to that person. Now let's talk about the episode title. The Idiot Army. That title could have a much deeper meaning than it first appears. My theory is that the army could refer to ordinary people being manipulated by the real masterminds. These people may not even know who they're ultimately working for. Some could be criminals. Some could be corrupt officials. Some could be people who were blackmailed. Others could simply be motivated by money. And that's what would make the network so difficult to dismantle. Jo can't simply eliminate one enemy and call the mission finished. She has to identify the structure. Who recruits them? Who gives them orders? Who finances them? And most importantly, who is sitting at the top? If episode 5 answers even one of those questions, Jo's entire mission could change. But there's another problem that could become even more dangerous. Trust. Jo has spent her career operating in situations where trusting the wrong person can get someone killed. And now she could be facing an enemy that specializes in manipulation. That means Jo may have to start questioning people around her. Not necessarily because they are traitors. But because they could be compromised. Imagine Jo discovers that someone on the American side has unknowingly been feeding information to the enemy. That person might not even realize what's happening. And that's much more dangerous than a traditional mole. Because there's no obvious betrayal, there's only manipulation. Jo could begin asking, who has access to the information? Who knows where the team is going? Who knows the details of the operation? And if the enemy somehow knows Jo's next move before she makes it, she'll know there's a leak somewhere. I also think episode 5 could put more pressure on Jo's team. We've already seen how dangerous these operations can become. But now the threat is different. They're not just walking into a firefight. They're walking into an intelligence trap. That means one wrong decision could expose the entire operation. Cruz, Tucker, Grady and the rest of the team could all become important as Jo tries to determine who can operate safely. And I wouldn't be surprised if Jo deliberately withholds information from certain members of the team. Not because she doesn't trust them personally, but because she needs to know whether the information leaks. That could create tension inside the team. Because once you start testing your own people, everyone becomes suspicious. And that's exactly what the enemy wants. While Jo is working in the field, Kaitlyn and Westfield could be dealing with a completely different problem. They need to understand the bigger threat. And that's where episode 5 could reveal just how far the conspiracy reaches. If Joe discovers a hidden network, Kaitlyn and Westfield may have to determine whether it's a localized operation or part of something international. And here's my prediction, they'll realize the threat is bigger than Joe's current mission. That could create a major disagreement. Joe may want to move immediately. Kaitlyn may want more intelligence. Westfield could argue that they need to understand the political consequences before taking action. And Joe? Joe is likely to do what Joe always does. Move forward. Because once she knows someone is in danger, waiting isn't really her style. But while Joe is dealing with an international threat, her family is dealing with something much more personal. Neil knows the danger Joe is facing. And he also knows that this mission isn't simply about Joe anymore. Their children could be affected. Their family could become a target. And that's something Neil may not be willing to accept. I think episode 5 could bring Joe and Neil into another serious confrontation. Neil could demand answers. Joe may not be able to give him any. And that creates a heartbreaking situation. Because Joe knows exactly what she's asking her family to sacrifice. But she also believes that stopping the threat is worth the risk. The problem is that the enemy doesn't care about Joe's rules. If they discover where Joe's weaknesses are, they could use her family against her. And that would be Joe's worst nightmare. Now here's the theory I find most interesting. We already know the season has shown us that Joe eventually ends up in Russian captivity. So we have to ask, how does she get there? Episode 5 could be one of the episodes that begins setting up that future. Joe might successfully expose part of the network. She might capture someone important. She might uncover valuable intelligence. But every victory could make her a bigger target. The Russians, or whoever is ultimately behind the operation, may realize that Joe is becoming too dangerous. And instead of killing her, they may decide to capture her. Why? Because Joe knows too much. They could interrogate her. Use her to identify other CIA personnel. Or use her as leverage. That would make Joe's investigation extremely dangerous. Because the closer she gets to the truth, the more valuable she becomes alive. So what could be the major reveal at the end of episode 5? My prediction is that Joe finally identifies someone connected to the hidden network. But that person isn't the mastermind. Instead, they reveal that they've been receiving instructions from someone else. Someone with access. Someone powerful. Someone Joe never expected. And that revelation could completely change the direction of the season. Joe realizes she's been chasing the wrong target. The person she thought was running the operation is actually being controlled. And suddenly, the entire investigation moves one level higher. That could be the perfect cliffhanger. So, heading into Lioness Season 3 Episode 5, I think we're about to see the conspiracy expand. Joe will get closer to the hidden network. The meaning behind the idiot army could become clearer. Kaitlyn and Westfield may discover that the threat is much larger than expected. Joe's team could begin questioning who they can trust. Neil's fears could put even more pressure on Joe. And most importantly, Joe could take another step toward the future captivity we've already seen. The biggest question isn't simply, who is the enemy? It's, how close is the enemy to Joe? Because if Joe discovers that the people she's been trusting are compromised, her entire operation could collapse. And that's what makes episode 5 so exciting. Joe may finally find the network, but finding it could be the exact moment the network finds her. So what do you think? Who is really behind the hidden network? Could there be a mole inside the CIA? Is someone close to Joe going to betray her? And do you think episode 5 will bring us closer to Joe's eventual capture? Let me know your theories in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more Lioness Season 3 predictions, theories, previews, and episode breakdowns. Because in this mission, the most dangerous enemy may be the one Joe doesn't know she's already fighting.